Joseph Wood, a 55-year-old man, is being put to death because of his conviction in 1989 for killing his ex-girlfriend and her father.
I take comfort knowing today my pain stops, and I said a prayer that on this or any other day you may find peace in all of your hearts, and may God forgive you all.
The state of Arizona used Joseph Wood as a tester for midazolam and hydromorphone. They used an untested, undocumented, and unsafe drug which caused him 2 hours of excruciating pain and suffering.
I don't think that we should be doing stuff just to scare people. Scare tactic, again, is something that I think our nation should be past. If they're 100% yes, they've done the crime, then whatever their crime is, I think that's what our law system is for. That's what judgment is for. Our law system is based on that. But just to scare people, there's too many countries around the world that still have that tactic of scaring people into submission. As you all learn in my class, it never ends well when you have a dictator-style mentality of forcing things upon people and scare tactics on people. It usually never ends well. And I would hope, again, that our first world awesome nation of America would ever go to that type of law.
Again, with the length of time it takes for that punishment to actually occur based on when they were sentenced, it's no longer effective because people don't really understand what that consequence was for anymore. And then again, to meet violence with violence, I don't believe that to be effective. I think our citizens, and especially our children, need to see that we can work things out in the future without violence.
Using our taxpayer dollars, the government spends millions of dollars on only a single death.
I think that more people would be in prison, but people are already in prison for such long periods of time anyway before the death penalty actually even goes through. I mean, even when someone is given the death penalty, they're in jail for so long before it even occurs. And so I think if the death penalty was to go away, there'd just be a lot more people in prison. We'd have to deal with, of course, the taxpayer situation in that, feeding them, housing them, overcrowding issues. But like I said already, I think that's one. I don't think really necessarily the death penalty is the biggest issue in crime. I think that how we verdict crimes needs to be looked at, because if someone does one crime and someone does this other crime, I think that it's really off balance right now. And if the death penalty was to go away, that all still exists. But I think life imprisonment still would obviously be a huge factor if the death penalty went away.
A lot of people will tell you that they feel like the population numbers in prisons would rise exponentially if we no longer had the death penalty. But I don't really believe that to be the case. If you look at the actual numbers of how many people have been put to death in the United States since 1976, it's really not that many. It's less than 1,500 people. In fact, Texas led the nation in execution since 1976 with just over 500. The state closest to that was Oklahoma, and they only had 112. And when you talk about the hundreds of thousands of people in jail, when you add a couple of thousand people back to that number, it's really an insignificant amount. So I don't see that it would really have any major effect on the nation's prisons.
Along with the cost issues in having the death penalty, the crime rates aren't being solved. The crime rates are lower in states without the death penalty. The United States is keeping the death penalty, but it solves nothing. Why have a death penalty? Why kill people if it does not have any impact on the crime rates?
I think we have to be very careful when it comes to these decisions. I mean, it is a state-based decision, but they have proven people innocent after they've been in prison for years. They have proven people innocent after they have been killed. I do think also at the same time, though, we spend a lot of taxpayer money on keeping people in prison for long periods of time. So I think, in my opinion, the death penalty should be based on the crime. I mean, if it is 100% definite that they have done this awful, heinous crime, and that is the verdict, then I agree with it. But if there's question, which there has been historically up to this point, people have spent many a year in prison and then get found not guilty later. So I think there's a fine line between the taxpayer and how we feel about the fact that we pay taxes on people staying in prison, and then sometimes things happening with the death penalty or with years of prison when they're not actually guilty. So I think it's all about the verdict and are they 100% sure.
I don't believe it's still necessary. There was a time when it was a useful punishment, but now from conviction to actual carrying out the sentence has gotten to be such a long time. People have forgotten why those persons were sentenced to death anyway. So if people don't understand the relationship between why they were sentenced and why they were being punished, it's no longer effective.
The drugs that are being used for the death penalty were not created for the death penalty. In the beginning, the large pharmaceutical companies were the main producers of the drugs. They were held to strict standards on the qualifications for the drugs, but due to bad publicity for companies producing the drugs for the death penalty and drug shortages, they resorted to using drugs from what they call compounding pharmacies, which are not held to the same standards as larger companies. These compounding pharmacies do not have to be listed by their buyers, and newer drugs that have never been tested before causing botched execution after execution, as it becomes more and more likely that the drugs will not succeed in their purpose.
An eye for an eye, of course, historically goes back to Hammurabi and the first law codes ever written. It was to, of course, create unity in a very widely dispersed Mesoamerican first empire of huge amounts of people that were not united, had different religions, had different languages. In our society today, I don't see that as necessity. I know that some people, some countries still have the eye for an eye mentality and punishment. I think as a first world nation that's based on law and human rights, as America is, an eye for an eye is in a way kind of a revenge type of way of looking at crime. What you did, you're going to get back to you. I don't think that that's actually healthy in our type of society. Is, well, if you cut off someone's arm or broke someone's arm, then it's going to go back to you. If you knock someone's teeth out, it's going to go back to you. If you accidentally killed someone's daughter, it's going to go back to you. I don't think that, I would hope that our nation is way too above that in law and in human rights to ever even think about that.
No, not anymore. I don't. I think we need to work more toward working our problems out and having a meaningful punishment for what people do. I don't think meeting cruelty with cruelty is really effective.
Joseph Wood and men like him are subjected to botched executions, as you saw. The way that the executions are carried out are not as precise as they should be for such a serious action. Just because a person commits a wrong deed does not mean they should be put through awful and uncertain methods of execution.
The amount of money being spent to carry out these sentences is beyond what it should be. The American people should not have to pay for the government to continuously misuse our money. As it stands, crime rates in the United States have not dropped as they have proposed to us. People keep doing what they want to, regardless of the consequences.